Hello, everyone, and welcome to Accelerating Institutional Success and Innovation through Digital Learning Tools. This is a Times Higher Education webinar in partnership with CLASS. My name is Alistair Lawrence. I'm a Special Projects Editor at THE, and I'll be chairing today's discussion. I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of experts from academia and industry, who are Omar Al-Jarrah, Vice President for Planning and Development at the Arab Open University, Massimo Gentile, who is Head of EMEA for CLASS, and Richard Osborne, who is Faculty Learning Technology Lead at University College London. We're also hoping to be joined from a couple of other panelists during the hour. There will be an opportunity to put questions to the panel during the final 5 or 10 minutes of the hour that we have scheduled today. So please feel free to write any questions that you have in the box in Zoom, and we will answer as many as possible before the end. Digital transformation and delivery have become a key part of the success of academic institutions. While digital tools give universities countless new ways to innovate, they can also provide challenges in student engagement and retention. However, when used effectively, they have the potential to transform universities into world-leading institutions. Before we begin, I'd like to hand over to Massimo at CLASS so he can tell us a bit more about how he's working to support universities reaching some of these strategic goals.
Thank you very much, Alistair, for the introduction. Let me just quickly share some screen. And so I'm going to be using some slides to support my talk. Oh, just a quick second. Okay, so we're there. Well, first of all, thank you very much, to all attendees for attending this session. My name is Massimo Gentile. I'm the head of Europe, Middle East, and Africa for CLASS. I've been working for the last more than 20 years in education technology, basically. My goal is actually to go out there and make a difference, empowering universities and schools using the most appropriate technology. So a quick introduction of the perspective here that we see from CLASS. We believe that over the last few years, actually, the perspective has been changing quite a lot out there. We see that even, just consider the internet penetration, we now have close to 60% of the world population that can access internet. Even though there are discrepancies between countries, we're talking about more than 4.6 billion people that can access internet. In particular, over the last couple of years, the workplace and education have changed dramatically a lot due to the pandemic. And we see that there are some changes that they're here to stay. But overall, education, workplaces, we see that technology, online activities, they cannot be asynchronous anymore. There's a very strong need for asynchronous communication for very advanced technology to be implemented. Now, we see that, particularly during the pandemic, a lot of institutions have implemented technology, have implemented, a type of tools to facilitate online meetings. But the thing is that there were some issues, and we actually quite so many of them, because they were lacking engagement. Overall, we see that these tools should facilitate the pedagogy. They should have the technical capabilities for instructors, educators, teachers, professors, actually, to run in the most consistent way their activities. So, talking to universities, we're talking to universities all over the world, schools and any sorts of educational institutions. We see that there are, looking ahead, that looking at having a technology that should be, definitely more flexible, more accessible, more personalized. When we say flexible, is because we're not going to impose, not technology should impose a specific methodology. So there is a need for flexibility to adapt to different methodologies, different type of, curricula, or, whatever way they want to use, instructors actually to teach their own content. Technology should be definitely accessible, and this is in line actually with even the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations to have a more accessible, quality educations for everybody, and certainly personalized. Educations today, education institutions are preparing the workforce of tomorrow. So there is a strong need to have, a personalized approach. So looking at the future of this synchronous tool, we start talking now about a live learning environment, which is a concept a bit different, just to focus on a single, let's say, virtual classroom as it is traditionally intended. today, when we talk to instructors, when we talk to professors, everybody has his own methodology. Some institutions talk about online, pure online, or hybrid learning, high flexibility, blended learning. No matter what the technology is, no matter what the methodology is, they all have in common the strong need for a solid, robust technology in order to perform their job for synchronous communication and collaboration, because this has a strong impact on the student engagement. A student engagement has an impact, as you all know, on student success. So I think that we think that at class, we see that there are some challenges out there, and by talking to educators, we've been discussing extensively, what are those challenges, when you want to implement technology, what is it exactly that you like to see in the technology to better empower you, to run your online activities or hybrid activities. Now, on the slide that I'm showing now, and I'm sure that many of you actually have a teaching background, you see that on the left side, you see a physical classroom, and then you see a virtual classroom today. Basically, we ran a survey at a class with several educators all over the world, teachers. So we asked them, what is your experience in a physical classroom, and what is it that you have more or less, or that you're missing, when you try to transpose those activities into a virtual classroom today. So looking at a physical classroom, whenever every teacher, every professor steps into a physical classroom, they start engaging with the students. They can engage on a one-to-one, on a group, or the entire class. They can start sharing content. They can do online exams. They can watch video. They can do a number of activities. And there is, a seamless flow of activities actually, into a physical classroom. When they try to transpose those activities online, they can do just some pieces. And basically they're missing a lot of those activities because the technology is not really built, or wasn't really built. A lot of those online meeting platforms actually out there to support an educational type of environment in the most appropriate way. So we believe that, that as a technology provider, we should provide, our customers and that, our end users with the tools that should enable them, to do a proper teaching and learning. So a lot of interactivity, a lot of collaboration. And in order to do that, you need to have a very robust technology. And how you do that? Basically, to this technology platform, you should have the analytics component. You should have the class management tools. You should have an easy to use, type of platform that can allow teachers and students not to waste any time really to learn complex technology, but just to use it. It shouldn't be an invasive technology. It should be very easy. And then you should be able to measure the level of engagement. And all this should be efficient, scalable. We're talking about, just small institutions to very large institutions. So user-friendly, scalable, and efficient. Now, based on what, we receive as a feedback out there, so compared to a physical classroom, what actually the educators that they would like to see is actually a platform, an environment, what we call a live learning environment, where instructors can do basically all those activities that can replicate an in-person experience. And actually with technology, you can go even beyond that and take advantage of a lot of, the aspects that technology can bring to you. But it's important to make, the access to this technology extremely consistent and easy to use. Now, talking about, class more specifically, because I represent class, we have taken into account, all this feedback, and a couple of years ago, we created a company. The founder is Michael Chasen, the former founder of Blackboard, actually, one of the most popular LMS systems in the world. We look at Zoom as a basic video conferencing platform, and we built on top of the SDK class, which is basically focused on extending the capabilities that a traditional online meeting platform can offer, and focus on what are all those tools, all those areas of functionalities that are strongly required by educators in order to do their activities online, to be able to have, for example, a product review embedded into a synchronous environment. If you want to do quizzes, tests online, you want to track the attendance, you want to make sure that you can actually track down in a real time, pretty much, the level of engagement of your student, because that makes a difference. And if we look at some of the business cases, I mean, the customer success stories that we have out there, like this college in New York, we see that even in cases where there is a lot of resistance, or there's some actually faculty members maybe even skeptical about technology, by implementing class, they could see actually a jump in the level of interactivity that they could actually be able to do and run with their students. And again, this has an impact, a measurable impact on the student's success. So what they report actually, it's about the ability to replicate an in-person activity, which is something extremely important, to have that kind of human touch, the level of connections that you shouldn't be missing when you transpose an in-person experience into a virtual environment. Now, looking at what these structures are looking today, again, we hear out there, not only our customers, but the markets. We're very close to lots of educational institutions, and we see that now there are many structures that are still kind of lacking the basic tools to drive student engagement, in particular for the synchronous part. And that's exactly why we have built, the specific, we call it virtual classroom, but it's an extended live learning environment. I mean, at the end of the day, the goal that we have is actually to have our platform as a mission critical applications. Well, as I said at the beginning, things have changed, probably forever. So there is no way back. I remember when I started working in technology, when I was working for Cisco Systems at the end of the 90s, we were positioning large network infrastructure solution to run applications on top. I was calling banks all over Europe. And some banks were still skeptical about having application to allow internet banking. Today, you go to any bank and it's unthinkable that a bank is not allowing their customers to do internet banking. Well, the thing is, this type of platform, the platform like Class, which is a synchronous tool to support live teaching and learning, is something that is becoming more and more a mission critical applications. And that's definitely the direction that we're taking with Class, to provide the best live learning environment. I'm going to stop it here and I'm going to leave it back to Alistair.
Great, thank you very much, Massimo. And thank you also to Hazat Al-Sharif, who's Vice President for Academic Affairs at the Saudi Electronic University, who is joining our panel with us today. It's very interesting to get that overview from a supplier point of view about the needs that must be met regarding flexibility and accessibility, and how personalized learning continues to shift and change and evolve and creates a number of challenges for universities as a result of that. With that in mind, I'd like to ask the panel how technology has given educators, so far at least, more freedom and creativity when delivering their teaching. Have they seen many advantages of this, or are there challenges? Does it create more challenges for you that need to be addressed? Richard, perhaps you could tell us what the landscape is at UCL.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Yeah, it's an interesting presentation. I mean, I think it's interesting to reflect actually on just how powerful Zoom in particular has become. And I think, we often argue it's because of that very flexibility it provides. I mean, it wasn't designed to meet the needs of educators in the way that it has, but it's been, I think, without question, the number one tool for my academic colleagues across UCL. Well, we're certainly sort of sticking with it. I mean, I think I was just reflecting on this question earlier. I think what I find it fascinating is how they've used it not only for delivering teaching synchronicity, but also asynchronicity, to using it as a recording studio for their own work. And the way they're produced, I always talk of kind of like, it's the Netflix generation of learning videos. It struck me the other day that Netflix and Amazon and the rest of them, they tend to do episodes based on how long an episode needs to be. And you watch a 20-minute, 25-minute, and so on and so forth. That's not how it used to be. And I see this in my academic colleagues as well. They're making a video as long as it needs to be to educate the student about that specific topic. And it'll be 15, it might be 20, it might be 10. So we're seeing a shift in how content is produced and away from maybe that classical lecture kind of hour system.
And does that create a need to manage expectations of students now, if they perhaps are used to an old sort of physical in-person timetabled approach where they will have, a 1 hour engagement about something, no matter what the topic is?
I think that's what we're moving towards. I mean, we're very keen on getting back to face-to-face at UCL, and that's certainly going to happen. But we're also having this big conversation, like everyone is, about how's the blend going to work? What is the best bit we've had? How are we going to bring that back into the lecture theatre? And how is that blend of learning going to continue between the online platforms and the face-to-face? Because we want the students back in the campus, we want them in the lecture theatres, but also having those discussions as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Professor Omar, can you tell us a little bit about your institution and how keen educators have been to adapt and to use electronic tools in different ways to educate?
Thank you, Alistair. Arab Open University is a blended learning university by heart. So we embrace technology in teaching even before the pandemic, and during the pandemic we moved to full online, and however now we came back to the blended. So we embrace technology because we believe that it help us to widen access to education, which is the key message for Arab Open University. We want to also to provide the student with flexibility, because we believe that in this way we can reach to the students that they cannot reach to classical universities. So this is the key message of Arab Open University.
Okay. And how much are you managing a cultural shift as well as a technological shift? Has it been easy to get staff and students to adopt blended learning?
Usually, all students will be subjected to induction when they admitted to the university, and during that induction, they have like a short training on how to deal with the platform, with the technology, and the same thing is done for all of our faculty.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Dr. Hazar, is this a similar approach that you take at your institution?
Exactly. So hi, everyone. So in SEU, we have the only, let's say, model of teaching is blended learning. We're using technology in our teaching. And that's the only one. So the students, they came and registered in the university, only using, we're using LMS and other, type of technology that help for learning. During the pandemic, SEU adaptive learning, which is based on the personalization of the content for the students. We're using AI algorithms to help learners to learn fast. So each time the learner, for example, watching a video, answering some questions, doing some assignment, it will assess the level of the students. So it will upgrade and crossing some stuff that already known by the students. So it make them pass the materials that need to be covered faster than the others who still need some time. So technology will help. This will speed up learning process in general, and help also organizations in, let's say, achieving the learning outcome of learners.
Thank you. And you mentioned AI and using algorithms to help with that process. Has this been a fairly straightforward process to onboard these tools, or has it taken you a long time?
Yeah, it is. To be honest, building algorithm is not easy. Okay, so you need to collect some information from the students. Do some analysis to see exactly where their position. You need to, let's say, break down the learning objectives to small parts. Then you have to allocate the content to that learning objectives, and to check with the students to ensure they achieved or mastered this learning objective before you moving to the next one. So collecting reports, feedback from the students, analyze it, that is the challenge, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Jolly, I'd also like to thank you for joining us. For those who don't know, you're Director of Jubilation Office and the Associate Director at Prince Sultan University. We were asking other panelists about how the onboarding of digital tools has led to more creativity among teaching staff and the new opportunities that it has given them. Some of the other panelists spoke about how now information is quite often partitioned into different lengths, depending on the subject area and the topic, rather than having a set amount of time to deliver something, like you were doing a physical timetable. There's also the advent of blended learning and how widely this has been adopted and how popular it is among different demographics. Have you noticed any particular change in faculty at your institution where they are enthusiastic to start working in a particular way or to keep working in a particular way now that we have the balance of in-person?
Definitely, lovely question. Good afternoon, good morning from wherever you're watching. This is Dr. Jolly, as introduced by the host. And yes, definitely, I would say digital transformation or digital technologies has actually given a tremendous power, not only to the educators like us, but also to the learners. We all know the benefits of using technology, right? And here at Prince Sultan University, we have been using blended learning and some kind of digital tools from long time. So when this pandemic came and we went online on 9th of March, if I believe the date is correct, it was so easy transition. It's just because, we have been doing this for long. And thanks to our president, Dr. Ahmad Yamani, the IT center, all the faculties, they have already been involved in all this training, and yes, using digital tools is going to give you tremendous power. And the change which I do see is a lot of enthusiasm, because it opens up creativity for the faculty as well. We are using a lot of business simulations now. Wherever you are, you can use business simulation as an assessment. We are using a lot of mind maps on tools, a lot of blended learning through LMS. And since somebody was talking about algorithm, yes, the solution technology comes as a solution to many of the challenges which were not possible to overcome in physical face-to-face learning, like giving personalized feedback or giving that, real-time feedback to the students, how they are performing. So which is possible with the learning analytic tool, which is a part of EDA, which is educational data analytics. And this is a plugin which comes in the LMS. So that has been really very, very beneficial for all of us. And talking about faculty, there has to be a buy-in. Definitely, you can't have digital transformation without faculty buy-in, without stakeholders being fully involved. So we do have ELC Center, which is e-learning center, as well as teaching and learning center, which are fully supportive. And we have some kind of a session every day, on upskilling the faculty on the digital tools and how effectively we can use these digital tools. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Massimo, if I can bring you in at this point as a provider of digital tools, how much does this resonate in terms of the need for making sure that staff feel included, giving them the structure and the support that they need in order to use these tools so they really can be more creative and they feel like they have more freedom to deliver digital education in particular?
Yeah, actually, this is an important component of our entire strategy. And what Dr. Jolly Sani mentioned is extremely true. Unless you get a faculty on board, you're not going to get any success. I've been positioning several edtech solutions from LMS, content and, synchronous communication, whatever. You still need to have those on board. When we do a class, for example, we have packaged training components, actually training packages for best practices. Although the platform is easy to use, it has a lot to do with instructional design, when you want to include a new edtech solution. So for us, it's very important to get them on board and to train actually, the professor, the key people, and provide the right level of support. And although we are a US company, we provide that level of support within country because we operate through a network of authorized, training and support partners across the entire world.
Great, thank you. It's interesting to hear about the in-house provisions and the schools and faculties, the type that Dr. Jolly mentioned. I was just wondering for the other panelists, how much of an onus is there now on providing staff training that goes beyond sort of just firefighting that we were doing at the beginning of the pandemic where we had to move everything online? Richard, you're nodding your head as though you think maybe there's something to this. Oh, I think you might be on mute.
Trying to find the mute shortcut. Thank you. No, it's just I was just thinking. It's funny. My role is very much about working very closely with academics about tailoring the centre may provide. We're a big place, UCL, so there's 9 of me around in each faculty, and we work very closely with academics to tailor what happens on the ground. It strikes me the other day we were in a meeting and talking about various apps, and there's so many applications out there. But for one colleague working very closely with students, it's only that specific app that they need. I mean, say a programming collaboration online learning space, which is totally irrelevant to so many other colleagues. So I find that tailoring very important, and that's when you find that need. That's where you find that faculty buy-in, finding just the right tool to meet their needs at the point of where it matters to them.
Okay, thank you. Professor Omar, how much does this factor into the planning and the development in your role? Is there a medium and a long-term strategy in place for staff training now?
Yes, Alistair, as I mentioned, at Arab Open University for faculty training, it's a formal process. When we hire the faculty, there will be an induction program, and there is a continuous faculty development program for upskilling and reskilling of our faculty. We introduce new technologies and train them on new tools, etc. At the beginning of every academic year.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Hazard, do you find that there are different levels of support needed for different faculty or different subjects?
Exactly. If we have, let's say, some courses that provide like virtual labs, different than these courses is more theory-based. So here you need more support, to run the virtual machine and, other stuff that to support the faculty member. There are some faculty members, for example, in activating the LMS tools, in authoring the courses. So there are different, type of support that is needed. We ensure that there are competency, or let's say a level of engagement and understanding of the model of blended learning, e-learning, and these type of things for the faculty member. That is a basic that it has to be. I like when you mentioned that firefighting, because some of the universities, they don't have, let's say, blended learning adapted in their institution. But for us, since that our model of teaching, so we have like a competency minimum standard that is needed, and skills for the faculty. On top of that, we have, as I mentioned, depends on the college, scientific department, the courses. It could be more support and help needed. We provided to them.
Okay, thank you. Massimo, do you notice if there is much difference between the demands of particular faculties, if it's a STEM subject, or if it's not, or if it's something that has a strong postgraduate cohort, for example? How much of it is about customizing the support people need depending on the subject that they're teaching?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because, for example, on STEM subject, they have different requirements, and there could be, let's say, more support to make it possible. But if I look at class will require the same level of training, let's say. But on STEM subject, what I see, also what I've seen, for example, on the previous company I was working for, there was a company specialized on STEM simulations, actually, for chemistry, biology, and so forth. They were requiring more content itself, so not just the platform, but they were requiring even more, specific content, actually. And it wasn't more the training on the technology itself, but actually more help at instructional design level, how to fit, actually, these components and redesigning. I see a lot of, the panels here are talking about blended learning. And as everybody knows, you need to work a lot on rethinking completely the way you're implementing methodology. Otherwise, with blended learning, you're not going to get anywhere. It's not about just doing some things online, some things outside. I mean, it's about actually redesigning the entire flow and taking a real advantage of what the technology can do for you today. And it's something that do require the right level of skill set and the right level of training, to be provided to them.
Okay, great, thank you. I suppose the other half of this question is talking about the the way in which we talk to students about this and the way we get their buy-in, get them to be enthusiastic about learning in a slightly different way, particularly when we talk about online learning, it has potential to gather a lot of data about them in the way that maybe some students aren't altogether aware of or comfortable with in the first instance. So what I wanted to ask the panel was, how can digital learning tools create stronger feedback loops between teachers and students, and how can this perhaps engage more and better with students than you can do if you're teaching in person? Dr. Jolly, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the question. We are teaching a generation which was born, say, in early 90s, right? And they are the millennial or Generation Z also. We cannot teach them with the old methods. They are the ones who are always on the phone, or on the iPad or some kind of a digital tool, right? And if we take them back to the classrooms like traditional way of teaching, they're not going to appreciate it. They will sit there by force, but they will not do it by heart, which we want them to do, right? So digital tools, when we use appropriately, timely, and wisely, wherever it's needed, as somebody said, yes, there is a lot of efforts required to rethink, to design your whole learning, whole pedagogy when we talk about blended. So students do appreciate it. And I did a research on the student engagement level with blended learning, wherein blended learning was included before pandemic and after pandemic. A high level of cognitive and emotional engagement was found when they did the blended learning or the digital tools, any kind of feedback given online. And it actually attracts the new age students, rather than having a traditional way of teaching. You have some kind of a hybrid, and you involve technology. And most importantly, in our institute, we have one of the ILO which says we prepare digital natives, and technology is an integral part. So we are trying to incorporate it as much as possible, not to overdo it, but do it wisely, as I said before.
Thank you. To that point about measuring student satisfaction, is it important to consider like the different types of metrics? It's not necessarily about an assessment score or an attendance score. It's finding ways to look at the overall well-being of the student if you want to maximize attainment and minimize the number of dropouts or absences that you might have.
Absolutely, you're true. Hit the nail. We cannot rely only on number of hits on LMS pages. That's very superficial. We need to dig deep. We need to use multiple sources of say observations, surveys for data collection. See whether students are really engaged, or is it just a superficial engagement, and how does it lead to the overall outcome achievement of students towards the end, or even towards the middle of the program. So yes, you're right. Depending only on technology and seeing the numbers will not give us any concrete results to make informed decisions. To make some interventions, we need to dig deep, and it requires a lot of efforts and time. And particularly, I would say, if people are involved from the beginning, they will be part and parcel of this whole process, and there will be a lot of involvement and empowerment to the faculties as well.
The interventions that you mentioned, are they typically done in person or electronically?
No, electronically and in person both, based on, say, particularly if I talk about myself, I do use learning analytics, I do use mid-course survey feedbacks, I do use focus group interviews. So whatever I get from there, not everything is important, not everything we can incorporate to do the interventions, but yes, both are included. In online, if it is things which are not working well, you need to make interventions, make changes, add new things. Even in the classroom, you need to do the same. So it's both ways. Since ours is a face-to-face teaching with blended, it's not fully online. We went fully online only due to a pandemic.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hazard, you mentioned before about the advances that you'd had in using AI and algorithms in order to monitor engagement and behaviors. The kind of engagements, the interventions, sorry, that Dr. Jolly is talking about, is that something that is part of your plan for engaging with students who perhaps are struggling to learn online?
Not really. So what we did as a part of the digital transformation plan, so we built the journey for the students starting from the admission to alumni graduating from the university. And in each, let's say, milestone or step in the journey of the education, we assessing the students on how they do in each one of them. That will help us to gather feedback in a proper way and, try to fix, enhance, improve, the whole experience of learning for the students. We take it from that perspective.
I see. Thank you. And Professor Omar, how is this process for monitoring students who perhaps are quite demanding or they are not engaging fully with the platforms that you're giving them? Do you have methods in order to boost student engagement and measure their satisfaction?
Thank you, Alistair. First of all, we have to talk about the curriculum and the content, because the content has to be built originally to make the student more engaged with the faculty or the instructor. So the way our curriculum is built at the Arab Open University is to increase and motivate student engagement. And as I mentioned, we are a blended university by heart. So we require students to attend 25% of the time, while 75% of the time will be remotely or online. So we try to make our students more engaged, and we currently are exploring the use of data analytics and artificial intelligence tools to increase student engagement. However, until now, we are using online tools, focus groups, student polls, etc., and assessment also, and feedback on their assessment. Usually the feedback is done both online and face-to-face. Since we have 25% of the time the student will be on campus. So, however, we are now, we have a big project at the AOU to use data analytics and artificial intelligence tools to collect more information about the student engagement, such that we can provide the faculty with more feedback on how to help the student to increase their success rate.
I see. Thank you very much. Richard, you spoke right at the top of the hour about how the impact of streaming platforms has almost been mimicked in the delivery of online education, where people are no longer bound to set time durations when they are imparting knowledge on a subject. Do you think we can increase student engagement this way in a way that doesn't make academics feel like they're too overburdened, or that they've got to meet whatever the pressing need of the moment seems to be for students who want online delivery?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, one of the tensions I think has come out of this, and we certainly have to look at quite closely now, is how much content we've got. I mean, that's been an issue through the pandemic, that a lot of colleagues responded massively positively and produced some wonderful, learning materials very rapidly, perhaps even more than the students needed. And so we had this thing emerging like box set learning, I think we used to call it. The idea, that they're almost consuming some of this learning materials in the way of a box video set, but having a binge on the weekend, because you're not going to learn by trying to just sit and devour hours of lectures in one go. You need that pattern of learning where it's, about blending that with practice and discussion and collaboration, so the inquiry and the acquisition is separate to other forms of learning. But I think there's also something here, just listening to colleagues talk about their situations. I think we can be tempted sometimes to think the students are all so good at this, and the evidence perhaps suggests they're not. We've got a massive pattern of skill sets out there in terms of learning technologies and technologies in general, and also hardware and circumstance. And when we looked into, for example, synchronous online teaching with Zoom and the rest of it, a lot of the reasons that students weren't engaging particularly was because where they lived, it might be shared properties, poor Wi-Fi, messy rooms, there was nothing to do with learning, which was fascinating in itself. I think we have to appreciate there's lots of students themselves don't necessarily have the best kit and the best places to study. They have to bear that in mind.
Okay, thank you. I mean, do you think there are, one of the ways to solve that problem of equity is to change the use space on campus slightly, so people can take an asynchronous learning, they might be learning through a streamed class, but there's still some provision on campus where, even as Professor Omar says, they might only be on campus for 25% of the time, but you give them the provision where they do have a physical space to learn as well as a digital one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at provision right now. We've got colleagues going around looking at what we have in terms of learning spaces. And we've noticed, for example, a drop off in use of our technologies and our provided PCs, where they're picking up their own devices more. But we are a central London-based campus. We have limited space, so how we use that space is critical. But certainly, yeah, I mean, going forward, it's looking at making sure as much as lectures are recorded as possible, but obviously taking into account academics' feelings in that perspective.
Okay, thank you. Massimo, in your experience with dealing with your university partners, is there enough of this sort of big picture looking at the different factors that might be in play that Richard mentioned that could be limiting online participation in ways that perhaps you don't expect if you just look at the time someone's spending online, or when they're logging in or when they're logging off?
Yeah, well, actually, driving engagement is something quite complex. It's probably one of the major challenges when you use synchronous tools, whether you're using these tools in the K-12 space or in higher education. So you see that they can, students can be even easily distracted, can get bored, or maybe you can see them looking at the video, but actually they're reading a newspaper or whatever, right? Just because they need to show up. So it's not enough to track the attendance. So what we have implemented in class is actually a number of functionalities to increase the level of engagement. So when you share content, for example, if you're not sharing your screen, you're sharing content in a way that actually can allow them to interact with that level of content. So the interactions between the students, a marketing group of students, and the teacher. And you can actually, based on the way you want to actually engage with them, you can have specific group sessions. Within class, you can divide them, for example, into different breakout rooms and advanced areas of functionalities. Now, in terms of what we're going to be tracking, I see there are some questions that are there in the chat there about what do we track. I can tell you that engagement is not something easy to track, but basically avoiding any type of intrusive technology, also because it wouldn't be compliant probably with any GDPR, type of policies, which is taken very seriously everywhere, definitely by class. We are compliant with that, and we have VPA certification, but it's important that our system, not tracking where the eyes is looking at, can have actually the system tracking where, for example, the student is actually clicking, if he's clicking outside of class as an interface, which is simply reporting if the student is on the software or not. A Proctor view is much more advanced than that. But basically, tracking engagement means, for example, for us, tracking the level of participation. If you have 50, 60 students in a room online, it's very easy actually to lose control, and you cannot remember as an instructor, who's talking the most, the least. So basically we have a features that is going to actually come out with colors pretty much in real time, and then you see 3 different colors that can identify immediately the individual students that are not talking, that are not really participating into that. So you can re-engage with them, or maybe you can come out with questions and redirect directed to specific students, because your goal as an educator, as an instructor, is actually to raise the bar and get everybody engaged. And we have a number of other functionalities, but basically it's all about, pushing the students to participate and then giving to the instructor, to the professor, the relevant tools to see real time and then assess them on an individual session, even across the entire semester, how that student is actually progressing, how, is the level of participation and involvement in all the classes.
And how important is it to be transparent with the students about the fact you're doing this? Because we heard people talking about, obviously Richard mentioned some of the reasons that people might feel uncomfortable or self-conscious on camera or taking part in the Zoom class. Dr. Jolly spoke about the needs for the in-person interventions as well as digital ones in order to fully engage with your student body. Presumably, tools like this might sound a bit scary to some people if, like the ones Richard mentioned, they're not totally comfortable with using digital tools in the first place.
Yeah, well, let's say that we have a number of functionalities that can allow the teacher and the student the right level of freedom, to decide what to do. For example, we have a privacy mode, okay? So if somebody is not confident, for example, showing their own video to the rest of the students, they can turn on the privacy mode. So basically, if it is mandatory to show their video, only the teacher can see actually the video of that individual students, but the rest of the students won't be able to see the video of that student. So we can respect different, mentalities, different cultures, or different needs. Maybe somebody's sick, he wants to attend the session, but he doesn't want to show his sick face, per se. So we can respect that for sure. And even when we launch, for example, the Proctor View, which is a way to share, the screen so you can run exams online, this will require actually the consent, the students to click and consent that this is going to be shared or not. So we're very sensitive about this. And respecting the GDPR type of policy, but also the individual, let's say, type of sensibility where it requires some sort of actually acceptance also by the students to make sure that the instructor can implement the right methodology that is not going to hurt anybody's feeling.
Thank you. Can the panel imagine a point we get to, if we're not already there at some institutions, where students just generally feel like there is an accepted level of how much they need to engage online when they're doing asynchronous learning? So there will be the sessions where I'm expected to speak, I'm expected to have my camera on, and others where there will be a greater amount of flexibility in order to perhaps maintain their well-being, or just that some concessions are granted for the type of reasons that Massimo outlines. Dr. Jolly, yes, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I always believe the digital transformation or technology is actually not about technology. It's about the mindset, it's about the people, it's about the culture. So we need to take small steps, if it's a blended kind of a thing, if you can meet students first face to face and then tell them about these things, start small. If there's an institution wherein students are really not willing to do all these things, start small with, say, discussion forums on LMS. Then you can have a collaboration on Google Sheets. You can have Jamboards. You can have small stuff like this and gradually move on to the webcam feeds, audio feeds and stuff. So you need to build a culture. You need to have a buy-in from students as well. If they're not involved, they will not be fully participating. They will just do it for grades. Which is not very much appreciated in learning. Yes, grades are important, but those are not the only thing. We need a holistic approach towards learning, and digital tools actually make them masters. We want to teach them to be master of their lives. The lifelong learning skills needs to be embedded as well. So I think it's all about the culture and mindset. It's not that much about technology. Yes, technological support will be there, everything will be there, but it's very important to make them understand like why we are doing it.
Thank you.
That's my 2 senses. Yeah.
No, it's good to have it. Thank you. It's interesting that you mentioned skills education, because this is something that comes up time and time again as universities are pressured to make graduates who are, inverted commas, more employable, or that they just are utilizing digital tools in order to teach people more holistically and teach people skills that perhaps get lost when you are looking at someone at the other end of a computer screen rather than sitting in a room with them. Professor Omar, you mentioned the balance between in-campus and online previously. How much is let's say the 25% that students spend online at Arab University, how much is that spent building the kind of soft skills that people need to attain?
Thank you, Alistair. Before the pandemic, actually, most of the hands-on basically are done on campus. However, after the pandemic or during the pandemic, we have shifted completely to more virtual in terms of the labs, and we have been engaged with Coursera, for example, for the Coursera lab, with Pearson to provide our students with the needed skills. However, we are faced with a major challenge regarding the engagement and regarding also the skills and the online platform, which is the digital gap, especially when we are operating in 9 countries. For example, we are facing some problems in Sudan. We are facing some technological and political, actually. And now we are facing some problems in Lebanon, for example. And this is why we have to be much more flexible in terms of providing our students with the capability to learn online as well as on campus. So we try to make a balance and to provide like a kind of a flexible environment.
Okay, thank you very much. And Dr. Hazar, how have you embedded skills such as teamwork, communication, problem solving? Are these things that are harder to embed in curricula when you are teaching online?
Yes, exactly. That is, we have it as ILOs. We have it as a graduates attributes. We have it part of the curriculum, the culture of teaching and of the students, the tracks, extra curriculums, courses also it's considering building the skills for the students.
Okay, thank you. And Massimo, how much does skills teaching and learning feature in your conversations with universities?
Sorry, teaching and learning features. What do you mean?
The skills education parts of it'd be rather than just perhaps teaching traditional subject knowledge.
Yeah, well, let's say that we see that there are universities more advanced and others that are less advanced, obviously, depending on who you're talking to. What we see actually, what we're starting implementing in class is that, there are universities where the same students, for example, is enrolled in 20 different courses, and maybe they're using class only on half of it. We see that there are students actually that are going, to the professors of those courses that are using class and start using it, and explain to them why, what are the benefits that they see. So for us, this is better than any possible marketing advertisement thing, because it's actually the student itself that is asking, to use class. And in the end, I see that also the other panelists are mentioning, this, sometimes, you definitely need to get this, the faculty, the staff on board. That this is kind of a mantra, but it is actually key, for any success. And I agree with Dr. Jolisani when she said that it's a mindset shift, because that's exactly what it takes. And no matter how good is the technology, and frankly speaking, no matter how the technology of the company I represent is good, if you don't have that type of mindset shift, and we can help, but the institution itself, needs to commit as the other, that we see clear examples here, among the panelists that represent institutions that are clearly betting for technology and are extensively using it. So until you see the type of shift, then it's kind of hard, moving things forward.
I see. Thank you. Just a note on the time. We started slightly late, so we're going to run to about 5 past. I hope that's okay for everybody. Dr. Jolly, if we could come to you next, please, and then Professor Omar after that.
Yes, with the same question about skills.
Yes.
Oh, definitely. For 1.5 years, we assessed all the skills online, right? We were all teaching online, assessing online, but we just can't simply copy and paste what we have been doing physically and online. There are interventions we need to be, taken care of and should be implemented, as I mentioned before. But we can very well assess and we can very well incorporate the skills, especially you just mentioned about teamwork. I think technology gives them the best opportunity to collaborate. There are many tools wherein students can do the teamwork very effectively. I think better than the traditional way. Similarly goes for business simulations, wherein we can assess their leadership skills as well. As I mentioned in the beginning, simulations are the best way, business simulation games, since I'm from the business background and from College of Business. So we do use a lot of business simulations, wherein we can incorporate all these aspects which were mentioned by all the panelists as well. So yes, it is a little challenging, but it's not impossible.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor Omar, did you have something to add? Sorry, I don't want to.
Yes, Esther. Yeah, I forgot to touch on one of the very important approaches that we followed, which was basically working with our industrial partners, especially on guided projects. So we try to work, for example, with local as well as international partners on guided projects, and we have this is very successful at the Arab Open University in all of the plans.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're tight for time. I'm going to try and we've had a few questions that have been put to the panel. Thank you for everyone who's asked one. I think we've covered up a couple of them over the course of the discussion, but perhaps one that that bears a bit more discussion is the idea that in what ways pedagogy has perhaps advanced or changed in a significant way since the beginning of lockdown and the mass shift to online. I was wondering if anyone has any observations about anything absolute that they have seen shift, and perhaps anything that they think still needs to be done, or what would be the greatest help to people in order to help both staff and students carry on to attain things and to prepare for the future. Richard, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that springs to mind, I don't know how many people are familiar with Professor Laurel's work on the conversational framework and learning types, but it struck me, I mean, I think given the current tensions, especially in government, to get back into classrooms and get back to lectures, is it possible there's a lack of appreciation perhaps in the wider populace? Education is not just lectures. You know, there's a pattern of learning types and movement in different activities, and students actually doing stuff with each other and with objects and thinking about things, which isn't just sitting in a lecture theatre. And you know, I think we've discovered that even more in this pandemic, when we haven't been able to be in a lecture theatre to produce lots of other wonderful things. I mean, simulations and the rest of it. We've learned things like, you know, we kind of knew before, but more concretely now, that having a learned experience of a virtual lab before a real lab really helps in doing better in the real lab. So, you know, I think there's a broadening of appreciation of the kind of patterns of learning we need to be engaging.
Right, thank you. Dr. Jolly, how do you think learning communities will change?
Just one point I wanted to add, because, you know, it's important to add here that we have learned a lot from this pandemic, and the teaching pedagogy or any of the style, if you talk about, it's becoming more learner-centric. Learners are at the center stage, you know, and educators are just becoming the facilitators. But that also requires a great skill, you know, to become a facilitator, how to channelize the students' discussions in the right way. So yes, it is moving more towards learner-centric. And that's the future, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hazard, how do you think communities of learners and teachers will change going forward?
Exactly, I totally agree with Dr. Jolie. It's how we make, you know, the whole education and learning processes around the students, and give them the support that needed, you know, to succeed, achieving the learning outcome that we try to achieve. Putting more effort and, you know, adding skills to faculty to make them able to support the students, that will help as well.
Thank you. And Professor Omar?
Thank you, Alistair. I agree with my colleagues. I think the future will see a student-centric learning, and we'll see more leverage of artificial intelligence, data analytics, to make the learning much more interactive and engaging for the student, and to instill the needed skills for the marketplace in our students.
Great, thank you. Massimo, if I can come to you to wrap up, based on what we've heard today from the panelists and your own experience, is one of the persistent challenges still how to scale this type of delivery, and how long it will take and how carefully it needs to be managed?
Yeah, good question. What I can say is that, as, for example, Professor Omar or Dr. Azhar have mentioned, at their own institution, they were using technology even before the pandemic, right? So they've been actually investing for a few years. So it's a process, and I'm pretty sure that it didn't happen overnight. So they built the right strategy. So when the pandemic came over, they had just to scale their existing technology, probably, right? And what happened for many institutions, I wouldn't say the majority, but definitely many institutions, is that using synchronous or even asynchronous, actually, online communication collaboration tools, content, LMS systems, whatever, it came all of a sudden as a necessity. So, and they had to deal immediately with technology where, you know, lots of educators and teachers had no training at all, but they did a massive effort. We must recognize that, right? They had to use technology they know as a mission critical, because without it, you couldn't do anything at all. So what's happening now, and we're working with several of our prospects and clients on this, we I think as representing a provider of education technology solution, we need to work closely with them to advise them and actually to support them developing the right level of strategy. Because now we see many institutions that try to capitalize on what they have been learning, during the pandemic and what they have learned about the technology itself, and they want to move forward with the appropriate strategy. So I believe now it's going to be very interesting for a company like the one that I represent, because actually out there we see more and more potential end users that are looking for the right technology. So they know much better, in my opinion, what they're looking for. So it's about actually the challenge is also for us to make sure that we keep on providing platforms that can always keep on adjusting on just today's needs. I mean, it's the needs of the future, because actually we keep on evolving, and that's exactly what we're doing in class.
Brilliant. Absolutely. It's definitely a work in progress. That's all we have time for, I'm afraid. So I would like to thank our panel, Dr. Jolly, Professor Omar, Richard, Massimo, Dr. Hassar, for joining us and sharing your insights. It's been very interesting to get an international perspective on this. Thank you also to everyone who registered for this webinar. Everyone who did register for this webinar will receive a full on-demand recording of the webinar, along with a summary article of the key takeaways. This will be published on the Times Higher Education website, and we will send you a link in due course. We hope to be able to engage with you at future THE events, and if you have any questions about this or anything of the points raised today, please feel free to contact us via our events platform. Thank you all very much, and goodbye.